Welcome to Beyond the Business Card podcast.
Or actually, and I still have never met probably 80% of my investors in person.
Wow.
All done remote.
Today's guest is someone I know very well, my wife, Helen McGuire. Helen's entrepreneurial journey started with a mission to fix the workplace. In 2016, she founded Hopscotch, a platform that helped women get back into work, gaining global recognition for tackling gender inequality in hiring. That passion led to Diversity, an AI-driven platform designed to remove the bias from recruitment. It didn't just make an impact, it won multiple awards and was acquired by the Access Group in 2023. Since then, Helen has launched the Founders Sanctuary, a consultancy and community dedicated to supporting entrepreneurs as they navigate the highs and the lows of building a business. Very recently, she added author to her list of achievements, releasing her first book, The Female Founder Formula, where she shares a clear-eyed, no-nonsense roadmap for those juggling founder and family responsibilities. From building businesses to breaking barriers, Helen's career has been all about making work better for everyone. Let's get into it. This is Beyond the Business Card with Helen McGuire. Helen, lovely to be on the show. Welcome.
Thank you. It's really good to be here.
It's very nice to see you here.
Thanks.
Right. So what we do in Beyond the Business Card podcast is we try and unearth the story behind the entrepreneur.
Mm-hmm.
What I want people to know is the good, the bad, the ugly.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people look at where someone is and don't really recognize the journey that they've got to get there.
Yeah.
And so what we do in this podcast is we just talk about that journey and we explain, the resilience that you've got to have, the good, the bad and the ugly along the way, as I said.
Yeah.
So if you wouldn't mind just by kicking off and just telling us a bit about you, where you come from, and just some of the early inspirations in your life.
So yeah, sure. And, thanks for having me. It's kind of weird, but I guess that's okay. We'll get through it. So my very, very early days, for anyone, who asks about this, sometimes they're quite surprised really, because I don't come from, an incredibly high-powered background. I don't have like a very wealthy family background or any of those types of things. I didn't start off life in that space. There were very few, I guess, expectations around me or anybody else in my family around what we might achieve. None of my family until my older cousin before me had been to university. I'm originally from Coventry in the UK, which is right in the middle of the country, as far as you can get from the sea, in the UK, apparently. I had a very solid start in life, very solid upbringing. Parents who were, hugely loving and supportive, sacrificed a lot to send my sister and me to one of the best schools in the area, and really wanted us to have a really good education. My dad saw that as absolutely paramount for both of us. And there were a lot of ups and downs along the way to make sure that was the case. And I write about that in the book, which I'm sure we'll come to. And it was really sort of up to us to create our future around that. We weren't mollycoddled in any way. We weren't necessarily pushed in any kind of direction. We were very much left to our own devices in terms of what we wanted to do, how much we wanted to do. No one was checking our homework. Nobody was really that bothered whether we got like good grades at school or whatever. It was just kind of, look, here's the opportunity, make of it what you can and what you will, sort of thing. And if you choose to not go to university, or if you choose to, live next door for the rest of your life, then that's all good by us. That was not our choice. That was not mine and my sister's choice. We did benefit hugely from that start in life, from that education that we had, and obviously the influences that we had through those experiences. We both went to university, and we have both traveled to, many, many, many countries in the world, both lived in different places, and both had pretty successful careers and now pretty successful businesses. My dad is an entrepreneur. He is still inventing things in his garage.
Yes, he is.
As you know, to this day. He's 75 this year. So there's a lot of drive, I think, that comes from that, and just from seeing my dad always on the go, always busy, always kind of creating new ideas, not always winning. Definitely not. There were some tough times as well, but always kind of getting back up and getting on with it. And my mum was just an incredibly, she was for the majority of the time stay-at-home mum, but she also had part-time jobs to support the family and to make sure that we got through some of those difficult times. So, we had a good kind of combination of support behind us. But, most of my family still live at home. My sister, left same time as me, and she lives on the South Coast now. But the rest of our extended family, for the most part, live in and around Coventry. So, we get to go back there and visit, obviously, as you know, with the kids and what have you. It feels like it feels like a different reality to the one that I'm sort of living in now, I guess, and have lived in for some time.
So obviously I've got a lot of insights into this.
Yeah.
So the bit I want to just pick up on, which I think is quite intriguing, is you had a very looks like stable family upbringing. Everyone's in Coventry. Everyone's, your extended family are there. But you and your sister felt this desire to leave, right? Mm-hmm. And I know that you are really pretty much the only a couple of others that have left. What was the reason behind that? Because it sounds like you had a beautiful time, went to a great school, good, good friends, loving family. Why did you want to leave?
Yeah, I think all that stuff's great while you're growing up. But when you, if you're an ambitious person and you have a curious mindset, which I did, I was always very curious about the way other people live their lives in different countries. Coventry is a very small place, and there's not a huge amount of opportunity there. There's not a huge amount of creativity. More so arguably now than there was when we were growing up. But I remember going to London when I was probably 8. I think it was the first time I went to London. I remember getting off the bus there and just thinking, I want to live here one day. Like this is, what is this? This is incredible. And I was always just very curious about that and very kind of open to different energies and different ways of living your life and perceiving things and exploring. And I was always quite creative. So I used to do a lot of writing at school. And I then got into music from about the age of 15. And I wanted to work in the music industry, and I knew that Coventry was not going to be the place for that. But, it all clearly, but it all sort of boils down to really just having that insane curiosity about, what's the rest of the world like, and desperately wanting to go and see that. And I didn't get that opportunity when I was 18. I had glandular fever in my last year at school. So my idea of taking a gap year between school and university just didn't work out. So I waited until I left university, and I went with my best friend at the time and traveled for a year kind of all around the world. And that's what really opened the doors. That and university really sort of opened the doors for me in terms of, my God, like, look at the possibilities, look at what's achievable. And I just always had this mindset that if that person over there can do it, why can't I? And just to keep exploring, keep trying, and keep persisting until I got where I wanted.
Do you think? I didn't really know what I wanted to do at 18. In fact, I hadn't got a clue until I really sort of fell into the media industry through the introduction my mum made. But the thing I've always been pretty interested with you is that you kind of knew from a young age that you wanted to pursue a career in music, didn't you?
Ish. I think I was too nervous to have ever said that out loud, certainly while I was at school. I remember seeing a poster on the wall. I physically remember this, seeing a poster on the wall at school that talked about opportunities in the media, kind of TV, radio. And I was probably about 15, 16. And I remember seeing it and just thinking, oh, that's not for me. I'll never be able to do that because I don't have that background. I don't know anybody in that industry. I don't know anything about it. Like, it just didn't feel like something that I could achieve. And as I sort of got older, as I said, my mindset changed to think more of sort of, well, why couldn't it be me? And why don't I just try and see if that, see what happens, see what works out. And the more you kind of inch that door further and further and wider open, the more you can walk through it and see yourself in that space. And that's kind of what I did. So I didn't know that I definitely wanted to work in the music industry maybe when I went to university, but I got more and more into music, and then just started to explore the different options. So, when I got back from traveling, I was very set on that path. I knew that I needed to be in London to do it. I was very excited to move to London, but that journey of kind of between deciding and actually getting that role in the music industry took me 3.5 years, about 3 years. So it was a long journey.
That's a long journey. And it's just one of those industries. I mean, it's notoriously hard to get into.
Yeah.
It's incredibly competitive,
Yeah.
and it doesn't pay very well.
No.
Right? So those three things themselves put off most people. Why did you think you could still get that?
Because I thought I've come this far, and if I give up, then that person who's just like a step behind me or on my heels is going to get that opportunity that I've worked for, and I'm not going to allow that to happen. And I just talked to anybody I could think of about what I wanted to do, and I took any opportunity. So the first big opportunity I had was at Sony Music on Great Marlborough Street, for anyone who knows London well. Huge, great big organisation, obviously. And I worked in in one of the kind of small departments there, and I spent most of my time stuffing envelopes and putting stamps on things. But at the same time, I was getting, the exposure to other people in the industry, understanding what it was like to work within a major label and whether that would be for me. And I applied for, every job that was going, like whether it was I'd kind of got myself some PA experience because I thought that's the easiest way in. I don't have any marketing experience. I don't have any real direct music experience, but I could be a pretty good PA. So if I get in that way, then I can maneuver myself around the company. That was my strategy. So I applied for every sort of PA job in the music industry or anything kind of admin related. I got rejected from everything. And then I had an opportunity to go into Radio 1, which was my be all and end all. I mean, I cannot tell you how many hours I would spend listening to Radio 1 specialist shows from the age of like 12, 13. I knew everything. I knew all the DJs. I had notes on everything. I'd write down all the labels. I'd know who ran the labels. I'd know what clubs they played at. I'd know everything about it. And I got the opportunity through a connection to do some unpaid work experience on John Peel's show and on Trevor Nelson's show.
And they were huge at the time, right?
Yeah, I mean, like two of the biggest radio shows in the world. And obviously I took it with both hands. And I remember going to meet the team and very weirdly at the time I was working at Discovery Channel as a PA because I was trying to get this experience. I spent most of my time with my headphones on listening to Radio 1 Listen Again shows, which I got into a lot of trouble for. And Radio 1 was opposite, just happened to be the building opposite. So I literally walked past there every day. You couldn't see in because obviously they didn't want everyone to see the DJs. So it was kind of a frosted glass thing. You'd walk past and I'd literally poke my head over the frosted glass and just be like, one day I'm just going to get in that. I'm going to get in my room. And when the opportunity came, I went sort of round the corner to meet the team one evening after work. And they were just so lovely. And one of them, Hamid, who's still a very, Hamid, absolute crazy individual, but, one of my best friends of all time, still a good friend now. Just kind of welcomed me with open arms. I really sort of opened some doors for me in that building. I did that, at weekends, during holidays, bank holidays. I'd work there till sort of midnight after my day job and then go into my day job the next morning. Like any chance I could get, I was in that building. I was going out after work with everybody from the shows. I was turning up, usually uninvited, to a lot of the outside broadcasts and the festivals and stuff. I was just like, I'm just going to get in there. So, it took me sort of 2.5 years of basically working for free and in all my holidays and all my spare time. And I went for an interview, an opportunity came up on Marianne Hobbs' show, which was my absolute favourite show that I've been listening to for years by that point. And went in to do the interview, went away on a holiday, and I remember coming back from the holiday. And it was a time where you didn't really have mobile phones, like you weren't that connected.
Showing your age there, Helen.
You couldn't, like you couldn't use your mobile phone. I went to Japan. You couldn't use your mobile phone in Japan. Like it would have cost you an absolute fortune. So this thing was turned off for the whole time. I remember getting back to Heathrow Airport, turning on my phone, and I had some voicemails. And I listened to the voicemails, like there was no WhatsApp at this point. Listened to the voicemails, and it was like, we'd like to offer you the job. And I honest to God, I nearly fainted. I had to sit down in the airport. I was just like, this is so, like, I thought it was a prank. Like I genuinely, even when I started, I was like, someone's going to take this away from me. This is a prank, you know? So it took a lot of effort, but I absolutely loved it. It was my dream job. I loved everything about it. I lived and breathed that job for whatever it was. I don't know, like I suppose it was 7-8 years really, till I was about 30. And met some amazing people doing it.
So people would say, oh, lucky Helen, got the job at Radio 1. I could never do that. But the thing that comes from your story there is 2.5 years it took you, you know.
Yeah.
Most people give up after sort of 2.5 weeks or 2 days, but you stuck at it for 2.5 years. Where did that come from? Where did that sort of resilience come from?
I loved it. Like, you know, I wasn't doing it to prove a point. I was doing it because I genuinely loved doing it. Like I loved the work. I loved the people. I just couldn't face being in a job where it wasn't going to work for me. I just thought, if I'm going to spend all this time at work, I need it to be authentic. I need it to feel like me. I need to turn up as me. And I need to be using everything that I know and love and enjoy in that role. Otherwise, what's the point? Like, what's the point in you making all this effort and moving to London? I might as well have just stayed in Coventry and got a job there. So it was a huge passion project. You know, it was, and again, I talk about this in the book. I make decisions based on, like, heart-led decisions, really based on what I love and what I get joy out of. And at that time, I wasn't worried about how much it was paying. I mean, I took a 10 grand pay cut to do that job. So there was no there was no sort of, that wasn't why I was doing it. And I know that's the opposite of why most people get up and go to work. They work to earn money. That was not my decision-making criteria. And so it wasn't a hardship. Like, you know, yes, it was frustrating at times that I kind of was having to do all this other work and it wasn't my job yet, but I always felt that opportunity was just sort of around the corner. And if I were to give up at that point, then what a waste of time. It's
just such a lesson for people in sticking, you know, if you truly believe you deserve that job, or if you truly believe like you can set up that business, like, just don't give up, just keep pursuing it. And there's a lot to take from that. And obviously I know the next chapter, because there's quite a few things happened in both our lives when you left Radio 1. But what was your reason and rationale for leaving that? Because you then joined a commercial radio business.
Yeah.
You left your dream job and sort of stepped into the advertising world. Just give us a quick sort of understanding. What was the reason behind that?
I think I grew up. I think I recognized, and this, you know, even though at the time I would not have put this label on it or this kind of perspective or understanding, but the majority, 99% of the senior management within the music industry at that time were male. And you would get the odd one who wasn't, but they were generally, I didn't see myself in that role. I didn't go into music to be in a management position. That would have been the opposite of what I wanted to be doing on a day-to-day basis. I didn't have any ambition around that at all. I didn't want to, I was working in specialist music, so I was also DJing at the time. And, I know to some people that sounds like a big deal, but we were all DJs. Like, we all had access to this incredible music. There was no YouTube. There was no online space to get this music. Either you got it on a white label under the counter at one of the best record shops in Soho, or you didn't get it at all, or you had it sent to you by the DJ or the label because they knew that you had the exposure to be able to play it to people. That was the one and only channel. Those radio shows were the one and only channel to get that stuff out there. So we were all DJs because we all had this incredible music collection that other people did not have access to. And all of that stuff is amazing until you get to about 30 and you just go, but this means that I have to spend between midnight and 6 a.m. in a radio studio producing radio shows because it's all live. At weekends, I am traveling to festivals, or I'm traveling, I'm at clubs, kind of behind the scenes, producing stuff or capturing stuff. And it is your life. And you just think, well, if I don't want to become management, then this is it really for the next, 20, 30 years. Do I want to be a 40, 50-year-old doing this, because I get older, but my audience stays the same age. And this is the challenge that many DJs have. You look at the Pete Tongs and the Judge Jules and the Roger Sanchez's and all those people in the world, they've got older, but their audience has stayed the same age, basically. Yeah. I mean, they've all found other ways of sort of monetizing or whatever. And I thought, no, I just don't. That's categorically not where I want to be. I always had ambitions to have a family. I was always quite businessy. I was always quite good at presenting myself and sort of, getting opportunities and stuff. And I just thought, I'm going to flip what I know and everything that I've learned through the ridiculous amount of writing that you have to do. So writing scripts, copywriting, creating stuff for websites, capturing content, creating content, obviously, but also managing people. You are in a position as a producer of managing quite egotistical DJs in some case, not all cases, but in some cases. You're also managing those DJs alongside, reporting into management, so the management of the radio station. And then you're also managing a team underneath you who are helping you to produce the radio shows. So there's a lot of skills that go into that. And I thought, if I can take that and flip it into something more commercial, so that I'm not creating content for audiences, I'm creating content for brands, then, who's not going to want that? That's a pretty good package. That's quite a good USP. So I got on the phone to one of my friends, Pete, who Pete Jacob. Yeah. Anyone in Dubai actually probably knows Pete quite well as well if you're in the advertising industry. We're very, very old friends. And I got on the phone to him and just said, look, Pete, I want to get into what you're doing. How do I do it? And he said, okay, well, I know a few people, send me your CV, I'll have a look at it, give you some tips and stuff. And he got me into marketeers, sort of played me into marketeers, and just, I remember going in for the interview and I had to create a pitch. I can't remember what it was now, some sort of press campaign or something for a brand. And I was like, I think I know how to do this, but I've never done this before. So I'm just going to do it and send it to Pete and see what he thinks. And he gave me some tips and how to better frame it and things. And yeah, got that job. And I think I'm, to this day, probably the only person I know to ever have resigned from a full-time BBC job. It just doesn't really happen because it's such a golden ticket, the pension and it's a huge organization and all the rest of it is seen as such a great role to have. But I was just no, I'm done here. I need to move on.
And it was a very wise move because obviously marketeers ended up being, for those who don't know, that's where Helen and I also met.
Yeah.
I set up I used to work at Marketeers, set up my business using their office space when Helen was working there. So that is how we got to meet. And so you did a year at Marketeers. Obviously then we met.
Yeah.
I've got this gig going on in Dubai. Backwards and forwards we're going quite a few times.
Yeah.
And then 2012, I said to you, do you fancy actually it was a bit before that, wasn't it? I said 2011, do you fancy moving to Dubai?
Yeah.
And I was pretty surprised actually that you were up for the move, but you loved it when you came out here.
I really loved it. And I think I was as surprised as anybody. I think everyone was like, what is she on?
Yes.
I was living.
It wasn't the Dubai of today, was it? Very different place.
Well, no, it wasn't. But equally, it was not. It was not my playground. Not my natural space at all. I spent 10 years in London living in some of the grimiest places I could possibly find. Like, I loved that. You know, lived in Dalston and had bought a place there by this point. Obviously you were in West London, and I was enjoying going to West London, and then we sort of moved into, you know, my place in Dalston. So we were sort of there, and I was just, I think I was just done. I had, to my mind, explored and kind of gained ownership in some ways of anything I wanted to in London at that point. And I was ready for a new adventure. I was ready to kind of go somewhere else, explore somewhere else, have a different lifestyle, like do something different. I remember us landing in Dubai, and it was so far off my radar. Like, I would never have come here had it not been for you. Like, that's 100% the truth. And then we landed, and I was like, what is this? Like, this is amazing. And I'm kind of looking out now at this beautiful blue sky and all the rest of it. And, you know, we came in sort of, I think it was November the first time we came, and it was obviously absolutely miserable at home. And I just thought, there are so many possibilities here. There are so many gaps in the market. There is so much you could bring here. And music was the first obvious thing. So met with Mike Buffton, who's still here, who used to run the Audiotonic Nights on what was it called?
God. 360.
360.
Yeah.
Because it was 360. It was a circular thing, like out at sea, off the coast. And I think I was the first like female DJ to play there. But I didn't ever want that to be my job. Like, I never wanted to be a DJ as a job, but I did want to keep it as a hobby. You know, I was doing, I was part of a music collective at home. So even when I left the BBC, I was still doing, okay then. Yeah. I was still doing that. And DJing, and like, you know, still had all of those sort of friends and what have you, and still do. And so I wanted to bring a little bit of that here, but I never wanted it to be my day job. But I just loved Dubai. I just loved the freedom of it. I loved the possibilities. I loved the lifestyle. And I just thought, cool, like, let's explore this for a bit.
And you ended up in the advertising industry out here, right? And, we don't need to go into lots of details on that, but that was a pretty decent job, right?
Yeah, I actually love that job. I met two of my best friends in the world doing that job. I was in Emirates Towers, you know, love rocking up there every morning, like, you know, dodging the peacocks as you sort of park your car, and it's just like, this is mental. And then getting to my office and having this insane view, and I was just like, who am I? Like, who is this person? And I'm sure lots of other people thought that as well, because I can completely understand that. But, you know, as I said, like, I'd made the decision 2 years earlier to flip into more of a commercial, using my skills for brands and for more of a commercial opportunity. And that was the perfect opportunity. Like, I was brought in to launch a content play for Pepsi in the region, which digital content did not exist in this region. When we first moved here in 2012, it did not exist. There were a few small pockets of creators. There was nobody like Hussam over there, who is, you know, now, you know, there are lots of people kind of creating content now. It's totally normal. 12 years ago, I had to dig to find these people, you know, local Arabic creators, to create content for Pepsi. It was called PATV. I'm sure you remember it well.
I basically lived with this brand. It was unreal.
So then I started doing that, and then I thought, I'm a bit bored of just doing it for Pepsi. You know, this is BBDO. They've got all like the massive brands like GE and Visa and all these, like Axiom and all these amazing brands. So I thought, let's go to these brands and sell this idea of creating digital content that engages more directly with your consumer, and helping them to also create digital content as well. And that sort of grew over sort of 4 years, and there were some big plans around that. And I loved the advertising industry, actually. I think of I worked a bit in PR, a bit in marketing, and then in advertising, and advertising was my sort of natural home, I would say. Like, I've probably taken a lot of lessons from that. A lot of lessons from all
the marketing play, really. A big marketing play.
Yeah. I really enjoyed it. I love the creativity of it, and just being allowed to sort of bring some new ideas, I think, to the region.
Well, it was quite interesting, because when you got the job, obviously, you know, I ended up helping get the job, which is quite funny.
Yeah.
But I think you were the first person to sort of step into that type of role. It was a completely new role. I mean, I'd never worked on it. I mean, my business obviously is recruiters for that industry.
Yeah.
We'd never worked on a role like that before. So it was kind of made for you.
No, it did. Yeah, it didn't exist. And you know, even when I was working in it, it sort of didn't exist. It was kind of like, okay, we're still not quite sure, you know, what you do or how to really scale this or monetize this. But because I've been doing it in the UK for years, like it was obvious to me sort of how to start to get it rolling and how to start creating some stuff. And the best stuff we created actually was probably the stuff for GE. I mean, that was stunning, some of that stuff that we got. And I used a local creator, Mark, who was amazing. I don't know if he's still here actually, but he was incredible working with him. And this is where I met, you know, two of my best friends, who anyone in the advertising industry will know, Samantha Stewart-Palmer and Tasha Cunningham, who are both still, you know, in those industries, still doing some incredible stuff. But I love that. And it was sort of game changing, I think, in many respects. And I learned a lot.
So that also set you on the path for your entrepreneurial journey. So do you want to just give everyone the backstory of how that you ended up getting into your first proper business from that experience working at BBDO?
Yeah. So when we had Clemmy, our first daughter, I took about an 8-month maternity leave, and that's quite long for this region. But I didn't know at that time how I was going to feel. I didn't know whether I was going to be one of those. So my mum, as I mentioned, was very much a stay-at-home mum, and I thought maybe I'm going to have this baby and I'm going to turn into more of a stay-at-homey type person. You know, perhaps it's going to completely change my brain. I don't know. Very open to that, like all good, like whatever happens. And then I had Clemmy, and within she was a very easy baby. And so within about sort of 4 or 5 months, I was honestly a bit bored. I was just like, what do I do? Like all I'm doing all day is sort of moving this baby from one like station to the next and like making it food. And, you know, it's just sort of like, I remember sitting at my laptop and thinking, where are all the emails? Somebody please email me. So I absolutely loved being a mum, and God, it wasn't easy, but my brain did not switch in the way that I thought it might do. It just sort of wanted to find new ways to play. And so I decided before I went back, to go on a photography course, because I've always been really into photography, and you'd bought me this amazing camera and I didn't really know how to use it properly and I wanted to learn. So, you know, I enrolled in this photography course, and off I went one morning to Al Sakel, and it's called Gulf Photo Plus. Anyone that wants to do a photography course, it's still there. It's amazing. And I walked into the room, and it was me and like 12 other people in the room. And I was expecting like basically people like Hussam. Hussam needs to be on camera because I keep talking about him. Like, you know, young creators, students, right, who want to learn more. It was not that. It was me and probably 12 women who were either my age or probably a bit older. And when the tutor at the beginning of the class said to them, hey, you know, what's your name? What do you do? They were all like, oh, my name's Sandra, and I'm just a mum, and I'm here with my camera because I don't know how to use it, and my kids are at school and stuff. And he's like, well, okay, who were you, or what did you do before you were just a mum? Like, good on him for asking that question, by the way. And they were like, oh, no, I was head of HR for a major corporate bank back in Sydney, or, oh, I had my own business in the UK, but I had to wind that up when we moved over here, and, you know, with my husband or whatever. And I was just sitting there thinking, huh? Like, what are they doing here? What, you know, no judgment, but like, why? And at the end of the class, because I introduced myself as being on maternity leave and working in advertising, all the rest of it, and they came, like about half the class came up to me and just sort of said, look, you know, sounds amazing what you do. Can you help me get a job? I'm like, no. How? No, I don't even know how to do that. What do you mean? Like, what do you want to do? And so we ended up having this conversation. And then I remember sort of coming home and we were talking about it one evening. And I was just like, this is ridiculous. There is so much. And it's not only from that class, right? I was seeing it with my friends who had given up their jobs and weren't going back to work. I'd seen it with colleagues. I'd had conversations at baby groups. And all of a sudden I was just like, there is this latent pool of talent out there that has incredible skills and background and experience, who have spent 10, 15 years building this up and who are now bored having to do photography courses because, you know, the corporate world out there can't think more flexibly about offering them an opportunity to get back into the workforce. And I thought, that's just not right. And so we had this conversation, and you were like, you know, from your recruitment background, yes, I think there are major opportunities for these people within businesses because there needs to be better gender balance. You know, the UAE Gender Balance Council had not yet been set up. We were probably about a year and a bit away from that, but there was a lot of noise from government and policy around this. And, you know, people needed more flexible hours contracts. I knew from my role in advertising, as I was said, I was trying to find these kind of creators to create this content. I didn't know where to find them. You know, I needed people to come in part-time and do some filming with me. I needed people to do some copywriting. I needed somebody to organize a shoot over here. And I ended up having to, you know, ask the office and say, do you know anyone who can, there was nowhere to find these people. And yet all this talent was out there. And that's when Hopscotch like dropped in, and I started to research. I went back to work, pregnant with baby number 2, with Arlo, and, you know, started to research like, okay, is this a genuine problem? And I did a lot of like talking to people, going to nursery schools, nail salons, hairdressers, places where these people might be hanging out. I put out a survey. I got insane results back. It was like 98% of women would go back to work tomorrow if they could find flexible working opportunity. I spoke to businesses who also were saying, yes, we need more flexible, you know, contracts, and we definitely need more women in our offices. And Hopscotch was the baby off the back of that, you know, baby number 3 essentially, which launched in April of 2015, eventually.
Was it 2015? Wow.
2015, yeah.
God, so yeah, I remember this so well.
Yeah.
I remember this so well.
Yeah. So it was mad, and it just flew. Like, it just absolutely flew. You know, I remember launching it, putting out the press release one morning. Within a couple of days, we had thousands of people register. Like, just went like that, you know, and there was just such a need for it. And that ran and grew for like 4 years, really, 4.5 years.
So the challenge with that business was always we just had so much talent and so few businesses that wanted to engage with that talent, wasn't it? And I guess still to that, it just wasn't it was a business with great intentions, but the fault was we weren't able to deliver the
scale.
We weren't at the scale. And also we just weren't able to deliver from a talent perspective. Businesses weren't prepared to give opportunities out.
Yeah. It was an education for businesses. And when you build a business where you are having to not just sell, but educate the market around a concept, a new concept, something groundbreaking that they've never seen before in this region, it's a huge challenge, because as a founder, you are then absolutely rinsed. You know, you're having to put out content and spend a lot of time talking people through the concept and helping them to understand it before you can actually sell them the solution. There weren't as many companies out there that were solution ready as we would have liked. And I can name some of them: Nestle, HSBC, Facebook, Amazon. You know, those were MasterCard. Those were some of the companies that jumped on pretty early. But it was too bit part. You know, it didn't feel like it was really getting to the root of the problem of why these women were not being accepted back into the workforce. And it didn't feel like the scale was there. You know, we had 20,000 women on our database by the end, but we had 80,000 people following us on social media and stuff. But I couldn't convert, like I couldn't help them all. And I came up with so many different, like, really innovative ideas that had not been seen in this region. But it was just scratching the surface.
Yeah.
And that was frustrating from a purpose perspective. You know, the passion was very much there. The purpose was very much there, but the profit was not. And when I say profit, I don't just mean the financial profit, I mean the profit of the people being involved in it. They were not profiting enough from these solutions. It was too small. And even when we kind of expanded it over to Asia, it's a different region with a different context and different problems.
But it was very male centric as well. I mean, when we moved, we moved in 2018 to Singapore. I was quite taken back by how similar some of the problems were.
Yeah,
they had though. They were same but different.
Yeah, same but different, and just a different kind of cultural understanding as well. Because here it's so expat heavy, so there is an expectation around gender equality and around women in the workforce and everything else. In Asia and Singapore, it's a lot more traditional, and you still have to overcome those barriers because it's mostly locals, not expats. You still have to overcome those barriers with the locals that women don't have to stay at home. They can have careers and still be doing those sorts of things. So it was a very different sort of ball game in terms of the education piece and in terms of the growth and the scale of it. But ultimately, I just felt that there was a bigger problem at play, and a service solution was not going to solve that problem. And I needed to get a tech solution in place to really scale it. So
would you call Hopscotch a failure then? You closed the business? Just so people can understand, what was, because we're going to talk about now the next chapter.
Yeah.
But I think the two flow together. Obviously, I know as well, right? I think every person that's sat in your seat right now I've spoken to has got that story, that one before their business, right? But with you, and I think that's so the case with you. Just so people can understand the context. What did you do with Hopscotch, and then we'll lead into what happened next?
So I searched for an investor. I remember us pitching to VCs when we were in Singapore. I remember putting together pitch decks. I remember finding investors, and those investors didn't work out. I remember being told that Hopscotch was a lifestyle business and wanting to literally throw, something at the person that said that. But the issue was they were right. And Hopscotch was not a failure as a lifestyle business. It was a fantastic success in so many ways because, it wasn't making huge amounts of money, but it was solving a problem for some people. If we'd have been happy to keep it small and kind of in Dubai and in this region, it would have washed its face. It would have been okay. Like, we were doing some interesting things, but that was not the ambition. Like, that was not the problem I wanted to solve. I didn't want to get a few extra people, bums on seats in corporate jobs in one city in the world. I wanted to solve the issue of diversity and gender inequality and inclusion on a much, much bigger scale. So Hopscotch was a failure in terms of that being achieved for sure. But it was a journey to get there. So everything that I learned going through Hopscotch and understanding what people needed, what the root cause of the issue was, I could then take and start to create some tech that was much more impactful and that got to the heart of the problem. And so we got to sort of 2019, didn't we? And Iris, our third, had been born the start of that year. I was kind of getting back into it. And I remember us having this conversation, and somebody came into the office and said, well, you obviously want to kind of techify this business. I am not a tech person. Like, that's obvious from everything that I've just said, right? I've never been a tech person. So I knew that wasn't going to be me. I needed a co-founder to help me to do that. And he said, have you heard of Antler? And I said, no. And he said, okay, well, they match you with co-founders who are relevant for you and for your business, might be worth looking at. I'm like, cool. Went back to our office, sat at my desk, and I filled out the application form. I'm like, cool, whatever. I'd seen a bunch of these things before. I'd actually paid really good money to go through some of these things as well, and asked for my money back at the end of those courses because they were so crap. And just
I remember you went that Canadian one.
Jesus Christ. Like, honestly, it was just kind of it was so frustrating, that journey of just like, I am trying to solve this problem and people are just taking money from me and not helping me solve it. There's so many crap people out there. And so I had very low expectations. And when I was called in for the interview at Antler, I'm like, whatever. I get there and I am so not really in the zone of it because I just think this is just another bloody con or whatever. And got 6 rounds of interviews, like tests and God knows what. And they offered me a place and said, look, we love the problem you're trying to solve. We really like you and your background. We want you on the program, but we hate your business. And I'm like, so do I. So that's fine. Like, it all kind of stacked up. And I remember calling you afterwards and saying, look, they want me on it, but you can't come with me. Like, as in not physically, as in we can't still be 50-50 partners. I need to basically scrap that and be prepared to build something again from scratch. And you were like, yeah, cool, whatever. Like, it's fine. We've done what we've done with Hopscotch and that's amazing. But it needs to evolve now. It needs to move on. Otherwise, we're never going to solve this problem. And so I joined Antler 11th of January 2020, just before the world totally imploded. And there were 80 of us on the program. And even on the first day, I'm like, really? Like, I was still a bit sort of skeptical of the whole thing. But they were paying me to be on the program. So I'm like, cool, I'll give it a go. And got through the program, managed to make it to the end. I mean, it is cutthroat to say the least. It's, people always ask me what was Antler like, or, how do you feel about it? And I'm so 50-50 because I learned so much in that program that I had never been exposed to before, and very quickly understood why we were struggling to get Hopscotch invested in, monetized, scaled, all the rest of it. Like, super quickly learned that, understood that. Learned that obviously I needed to find a co-founder, knew that already. Sort of worked with somebody within the program, started to develop the idea of diversity, which was, taking a lot of what I'd learned from Hopscotch, but making it into an AI-driven tech solution that got to the heart of the issue of bias, essentially. The reason why women were not getting those opportunities was because there was so much sort of inherent bias around, oh, these women have been out of the workforce for 5 years, or, they've not worked in this region or whatever. They weren't seeing these people for the opportunity and the talent that they were. They were too busy looking at the gaps in their CVs or their age or the fact that they've got kids, or all of these irrelevant factors. So, diversity was really the answer to that, not just for women, but for eventually eight different diversity characteristics. So we looked across things like race and ethnicity, across religion, across socioeconomic status, gender, obviously, age, disability, all sorts of different factors. And we built that into the software so that essentially human bias was taken out of that decision-making process for big HR departments within corporates, as well as for recruitment agencies. And that, that was a 50-50 venture with my co-founder, who I actually found after the program. Somebody that I've known, Hayley, I'd known her for maybe about a year, and we've worked together on different projects. And
I remember us having the conversation. You were like, I think I found the perfect co-founder, and you had.
Yeah, I mean, I got through the program, as I said, and we sort of pitched at the end. We didn't get the investment, which was fine.
Everyone that got it was like a fintech or something, wasn't it?
Well, everyone that got, to be honest, like, it's, I hate to say this, but it's really not the be all and end all to get investment from Antler, because it's an early stage VC. And, we could do a whole other podcast on this, basically on this topic of where to find investment as an early stage business, but it is not from a VC, because the terms are just going to be horrible and definitely not in your favor. And that is the case with Antler, and I understand why people take it, because it's easy, easy money, but you've gone through the program and you're being offered 60 grand or whatever it is at the end of it. It's probably a different number now. And you're like, brilliant. Like, we need that to be able to build our tech. We need it to be able to build our go-to-market. We need to get off the ground with this. How else are we going to do it? Sure, of course I'm going to take it. But, I didn't find my sort of forever co-founder in that, or my co-founder for this business in that program. So, and the idea was nowhere near fleshed out enough to be investable. So I didn't get that investment. So I left the program. COVID was like, full on by this point.
You're leaving the fact that you probably were patient 001 from getting COVID up.
Yeah, I also had had COVID for 6 weeks during the program. Which I didn't know.
January or March.
I didn't know because there were no tests, right? There was no testing, so nobody knew. So there was no tests available.
You had this very annoying cough. My God, that cough was annoying.
So we didn't know. And I kept going to the doctors and they were like, "Well, have you been to China?" I'm like, "No." But like 50% of the people on this program are Chinese.
There were like 4 flights a day from Wuhan.
It's like, so there was no way of like, no one knew, but yeah, looking back, probably, right? It's fairly probable. And it wasn't just me on the program, like half of us were sick. So anyway, that all sort of, went through that process and then, got to the other side and thought, right, I've got a good idea. I'd hustled in that program as well. Like I'd gone out to multiple different businesses and said, here's the product. First, it was something we now call the Bias Analyzer, which is essentially an AI-driven tech product that helps you to understand whether there's any bias or non-inclusive language and structure within your job ads or within any copy. And it would go through and it would highlight where there's any sort of biased phrases, whether that be gender or age or race or ethnicity or religion, whatever it may be. It would give you a score and then it would give you suggestions. And I'd found the perfect partner in the University of Nottingham's Centre for Applied Linguistics. I'd been introduced to them by a partner who I'd worked with at Hopscotch, Charlie, who was an ex-Nottingham University guy. And it all just sort of fell into place. It was like, I've got 5 years of research to build this AI with, that is completely clean data, that is, backed, but scientifically backed. I've got the idea. I've got 20 companies who say, if we get this built, we will use it in our business. Diversity was going like that. There was a huge amount of noise around diversity, equity, and inclusion at that point. We were sort of pre-George Floyd at that stage, but there was
pre-ChatGPT as well.
Pre-ChatGPT, there was still an awful lot of just a lot of focus around equality in the workplace. And I thought, I just got to find a co-founder. And I remember just having these conversations with Charlie and with the University of Nottingham and just thinking, and suddenly I was walking around one day and I thought, why don't I give Hayley a call? Because Hayley was, at that point, she had her own tech offshoring business. She was running a not-for-profit called Girls in Tech. She had a tech background, right? And we got on well. She was obviously very passionate about the issues of gender equality. And so I picked up the phone and I just said, look, blah, 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 this is the idea. I was being on the phone for quite a long time, going backwards and forwards. She was due to join the next cohort of Antler, just completely coincidentally. And, over a period of 3 or 4 months, we just started working together and building out this idea and building out this concept, and, starting to get under the skin of it and interview people and really understand what their issues were around diversity and data and bias and where they were seeing the gaps and the problems in their businesses. And eventually we got to the point where like, well, we've sort of got this bit, I had a name for it already. I decided the name during Antler was Diversely. We've got a name for it. We'd sort of built this skeleton website. We got an MVP. We'd started to have all these conversations and we were like, well, we might just do this together rather than you going and doing Antler, which you don't really need to do because I can tell you everything that I've learned on there. Let's just do it sort of thing. So I think we incorporated the company. We switched Hopscotch into Diversely essentially in Singapore. And then we also incorporated eventually in the UK. And we started to raise money, investment for that business. And we closed that first round pretty quickly. Within sort of 3 or 4 months, we closed about 250 grand. Having never done anything like that before. But that was the journey of 2020, really. By the end of that year, I'd got a co-founder, I'd got a new business. The tech was working. We'd started to get the MVP working. We'd started to build a wait list. We had probably, I think, 12 investors at that point, 10, 12 investors. And yeah, we were up and running,
And you did it all during COVID?
All during COVID, all remote.
Yeah.
Haley and I barely saw each other in person.
Yeah. Just geographically, give everyone an idea where all the staff were based.
So me and Haley were at that point, we were in Singapore. We had our tech team in Vietnam, who again, we never met in person. We had some salespeople in Bangkok and Nairobi. We had our marketing executive in Mumbai at the time. And then we had some other salespeople who were working sort of freelance for us in the UK. So yeah, and we had in the end, we had a legal person based in between Amsterdam and Italy. So yeah,
and then
fully remote.
You moved to Dubai and Haley moved to Warsaw, wasn't it?
Yeah, she was in Warsaw and I was in Dubai, and then she eventually moved to Abu Dhabi. So we would find like places to meet up. Like we went to Budapest one time. Like I went to Warsaw. She would come here.
Yeah.
We'd find places to sort of meet up as like every few months, really, face to face, and that was always really helpful. But I still have never met any of those staff in person. And I still have never met probably 80% of my investors in person.
Wow.
All done remote.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's just phenomenal,
Which is
isn't
a bit
really?
nuts, yeah.
So, I mean, that's a pretty amazing origin story. Obviously, you then built the business. But it wasn't, it was a tough journey, wasn't it? I mean, let's be building a startup. It's not for the faint-hearted. I know, obviously, you got to the acquisition part, which we can talk about. But give us an idea. And in the middle of that, the market sort of fell on its arse, really, in 2022 as well.
Yeah, 2022 was a tough year. I mean, we'd made some good headway. I think, when you're a founder, you are learning every single day. If you're a founder and you're not getting up and you've learned something new by the end of the day, you're doing it wrong. Because if you want to break new ground and if you want to steal a march on your competitors, there is no point getting up and just rehashing, because eventually somebody's just going to come in and like cut you out, right?
Yeah.
But equally, for the two businesses those two businesses that I started, nobody had ever done that before. Like hopscotch was a completely new concept for this region. Diversely was the first truly diversity, equity and inclusion tech platform that had been created. I did not have a blueprint or a roadmap. Adding to that, the fact that, we have 3 kids, the majority of that responsibility also fell to me. You were incredibly busy. And we had help, like 100%, write about that in the book. Like we had 2 helpers in Singapore, and we've got a helper here because, we don't have family and we don't have that extra sort of layer of support. But equally, I could never have done it without that. But it's an extra pressure because you're still mummy. You're still mummy at the end of the day or during the day when you're working from home. You're still having to factor in the school runs and the school lunches and the play dates and the ECAs and, the sick days. I mean, Iris is off today at home, right? That happens regularly. And you are still solving the problems for those small people on an almost hourly basis. So you don't get to switch that off. So you combine all of those things, and I am then in a space that I have no personal roadmap. I have no relatable roadmap. I have no mentors or advisors who are in this position. No one. Like literally not. I think one person, Kate, who we went through 3 accelerators in the end. Kate was the only relatable person because she had kids. And she was doing, she was building something.
Yeah, I remember there were lots of people offering you advice, and it was very kind of them, but not a lot of people really had that experience. And
they didn't have the answers.
Yeah.
Because if you are building something that nobody's built before, who's going to have the answers to that? You have to find the answers. And that's what I mean by every day you get up and you've got to be learning something new. And for me in that business, for Haley, the learning something new was building the tech because it'd never been built before. So we had to find a way of, building this AI-driven tech that was scalable, that was commercially viable, that worked, but also that was compliant. Because dealing with diversity data is an incredibly tricky and quite emotive subject. So there were all of those things to try and resolve, which, we gradually worked through. But then on the flip side of that, I'm on the commercial side. So I'm figuring out how to get this messaging across. Like, yes, people want to talk about DEI, but who's going to pay for it? Like, where is the actual problem sitting for these companies that they are going to pay for a solution around it? And how do I craft that messaging? And then how do I go into these sales meetings and sell that? Because I recognize that I was great at I could sit on a podcast for 5 hours and talk about what I'm doing and be passionate about it and all the rest of it. It's a very different skill set to sell it. Very, very different skill set. You need to flip it into, what's your problem? What have you done so far? What's working? What's not working? What happens if you don't solve this problem? Whose heads are going to roll? You need to find that out for, the very beginning of the conversation. And then what value are you going to derive from a solution? And how can I then package that up for you so that it makes sense? So it was a huge, huge learning curve for me, because I've never sold tech into massive corporates. I'm not a tech sale, This is a whole skill set that people get paid hundreds of thousands of dollars for in certain markets. So yeah, there was, and then, you bring into the picture the raising the investment, the managing of the investors, the managing of that budget and that runway, understanding how all of that stuff works. Like, it was an enormous learning curve,
Obviously, it's living with you, and I could see the stress you were going through. And remember you always saying to me that I'm not a salesperson. I've always felt you're one of the best salespeople I've ever met, but because you passionately believe in what you're doing, and that really comes across. So we're going into 2022. And also late 2022. And is that when you were approached about an acquisition or about a sale then?
Yeah.
Just help frame that for people.
Not so much about a sale, but we'd probably got sort of 6 figures in our business by that point. And I'd gone away and I'd done a lot of this learning. I had taken myself, the way that I phrased it is, I am going to take myself to sales school and I am going to understand how to sell tech. And I did that. And that is what sort of turned the ship from sort of a 5-figure business into a high 6-figure business. And, we were going through that process, and that was brilliant. But our key buyers of the software were, as you can imagine, industries where typically they were not so diverse and things were, not so well represented internally. So they wanted to be more inclusive in the way that they were trying to attract talent, make decisions based on whether they could do the job, as opposed to, whether they looked like the CEO, who is typically a white male, middle-aged founder, So those were the tech industry and the finance industry. Those were kind of our 2 big winners, really, in this space. And 2022, the bottom fell out of both of those industries very rapidly. Anyone who remembers 2022, and people don't really remember this, but the world was in a very weird, we don't know which way this is going to go. Is this going to collapse after COVID? We come out of COVID. Is the financial world just going to totally implode? Or are we going to build on what we've learned and really sort of start to grow and come out of it in a positive way? And at that point, towards the end of 2022, probably 80% of our clients either were not hiring, which meant they had no reason to use hiring software because they weren't, this thing plugged into their hiring system. Yeah. If you're not hiring, why do you need to keep paying for it? Or they were struggling financially themselves, and so just not investing in new tech. And the same with investors. They were seeing major issues in terms of the financial climate at the time, and so they were pulling back on any new investments and just putting any of the cash they had into to shore up their existing investments. And HR tech businesses were really, really struggling at that point. They just weren't really growing. So for us, finding our seed round, kind of our next level of investment, we've raised by this point just over $500,000 US, but seeing that getting to that next level was just becoming further and further away. And it wasn't that we didn't have a good business and that it wasn't running Well, it was just the wider climate was not as open to the ideas that we were bringing, and did not have the capital, essentially. It wasn't confident enough in deploying that capital. So we at that point were working with some really good partners. You can probably imagine some of the big HR and recruitment tech partners out there that we were working with, and they'd started just to knock on the door and kind of say, look, we really like your tech. We don't have anything like this within our suite. We would love to explore partnering with you or understanding better how it works. And we were like, cool, okay. And I remember just kind of thinking, the problem I want to solve here is to get to the heart of the issue. And I remember writing a note to all of the staff at the beginning of 2023, January 2023, just saying, our mission this year is to get this tech in as many hands as we possibly can. Whether that's recruiters, whether it's in-house, that's what we need to do. And we will do anything we have to do to make that happen, because that's how we're going to solve the problem. And I never wanted to be CEO of a 10,000 person massive global business. That was not my aim. Again, this was not a business born out of financial gain necessarily. It was a business born out of trying to solve the problem. So how do I best solve that problem? So we started talking to these partners who were a billion times bigger than us, and just saying like, okay, what would this look like? By probably April, May, actually my birthday, I was in London having these conversations. That was middle of May 2023. We were having serious conversations about an acquisition and what the numbers looked like and what that looked like for us and all the rest of it. And, we were both very on board with that happening, because that's how we scale. If we couldn't get investment, then we need to partner with someone who's much bigger than us, who can push it out there and kind of help us to do that, get some sort of fuel, some firepower behind it. And that acquisition happened, within 6 months of those conversations starting. So it was seemed like an incredible, it's the last chapter in the book. And it was the hardest chapter to write, because it was so kind of fast, and it was so much to learn, and it was so much that I didn't know and never done before. And it felt
this is due diligence, etc.
Yeah, due diligence, and just dealing with, we were two people dealing with an army of maybe 60, maybe even more than that on their side. This is a £9 billion company, the Access Group, that bought us. So to them, this was just a drop in the ocean. To us, it was like, what, everything, right? This was kind of our baby, like growing up and being deployed to potentially thousands and thousands of customers. And, it was a bit like cracking a nut with a sledgehammer. And we were the nut. And no fault of theirs. This is just the process. This is just their processes. Anyone will go through these processes. They are just your due diligence, legal, financial, turning over every single stone in your business. And you just have to go through it and just get out the other end. But it was painful.
Yeah.
It was painful.
Yeah.
It was hard.
Yeah. I was living with you through it, so I saw it play out, right? So that leads us on to what you're up to now. So just give us a rundown of what you're doing now. Obviously, with all this experience that you've just gone through, there's heaps of value there for people. So
yeah. I mean, look, I think when the earn-out finished, so we did a 6-month earn-out, worked with a team there, which I'm still consulting into them now, occasionally, and when I finished that, which was sort of March 2024, I was very allergic to the idea of starting anything new, because it had been 10 years of not just building businesses, but building a family at the same time, at the same pace, and us moving countries, 2-3 times, whatever, in that period. So throw all of that in, and COVID and everything else. And it was just I just needed to heal. I needed some respite from that, and I needed my brain to just have a bit of a break. So it was very, I described this we're talking about this in business terms, but this is a massive emotional journey. It's a massive sort of learning journey, and it affects so much else in your life. So many of the relationships, friendships, connections that you have will change over that period of time. So and that is the case for any entrepreneur. And so I sort of just took a step back, but at the same time, I was getting people knocking on my door because I've always been very, very open about this journey on LinkedIn. And, you can look at LinkedIn, it's like a diary, like you can just read it and it's all there, right? No one's going to spend their time doing that. But if you did, it's there. And so people kind of started knocking on my door, just going, I'm building this. I've been watching your journey. Have you got 30 minutes to jump on a call? And I'm like, oh God, I'm going to be the most useless mentor or advisor in the world because I have no patience. Like, I just can't, this is not going to be me, but sure, I'll help a few people out if I can. And so I jumped on these calls, and these calls turned from sort of 30 minutes into 60 minutes, from 60 minutes into 90 minutes. And I'd come off those calls being like, I love that conversation. I got so much joy from working through those problems because I'm a problem solver. I'm a really sort of creative person. You put me in a room and say, give me 10 ideas around that and done, right? Like, that's where I get a lot of my energy from. And so talking to these people and taking what I've learned and my experience and helping them to apply some of that to their business was so rewarding. And so I started just doing some consulting and some advisory and, started building up a little kind of portfolio of clients. And I remember just saying to you, oh my God, people are paying me for this. This is nuts, And at the same time, I'm writing the book in the background because...
Which is tough.
Yeah. Well, I love the process of that, actually, because again, it's a creative thing. And I've always been a writer, and I love writing. And I had two amazing book coaches who I work with on that, who are brilliant. So, all of this stuff was kind of coming together, and I was like, I need to find a way of actioning this and of bringing it to life. Because when I was going through this journey, as I said, I had no relatable mentors. I spent thousands of pounds and thousands of hours learning this stuff, getting it wrong, learning it again, getting it wrong, eventually kind of getting it right over 10 years. It doesn't need to be that hard. Like, I can take those lessons and I can put them in a book, and then I can frame them in a way that helps people to accelerate their progress and gets to the heart of what their issue is, in order to grow not just their business, but their personal effectiveness. That's a lot of the lessons that I learned. I did a CBT course. I did a Reiki course, as you know, because you've been a
Reiki,
You've
yes.
been a Reiki patient of mine.
Yes, I have, yes.
Because those are all the sort of the energies really that I had to rely on when I was building these businesses, but I had no framework, no official framework around which to hang them. So that's why I did those two courses. That's kind of why I wrote the book, to get those kind of frameworks in place so that they would be useful to other people. So it's not just me telling my story, it's stuff that people can apply in their lives and in their businesses. And so we sort of got to the end of last year, and I was like, right, I've got the book. I've done the podcast for 2.5 years.
Here is the book, everyone. There you go. There's a plug.
I've done the podcast for 2.5 years. We ran a podcast called The Digest, which was incredible. I've got these kind of clients. I've got all these sort of lessons and learnings. I need a central place to house this. I need a place where people can come, where they can connect with each other, where they can connect with me. But almost as importantly as that is the network that I've built up. I ended up talking to these founders last year and through this year that I'm working with now, and just connecting them into people that I knew who could help them with sales, who could help them with tech, who could help them with marketing or SEO, who could help them find the right, whatever it was. Like, I've got somebody pretty much in every corner, because my second business marketed into Asia, into Australia, into the UK and into the US, and my first one in this region. So I've got this sort of global network of incredible, like, world-class people who have helped me solve lots of different problems. And it's like, what do I do to bring all of that together? So the Founder Sanctuary is essentially the answer to that, which is an online membership that helps you to level up your business and personal growth, for founders that are maybe feeling a bit stuck, a bit confused about how to do that in a relatable way. So in a flexible format that's connecting lots of dots for people, essentially. And that launches in April. I know you put the survey out this morning on your LinkedIn.
I did, yes.
This is one of the lessons in the book around doing your own proprietary research. It's very important to kind of get under the skin of the problem. So that's the phase I'm in at the moment, building that out, building a wait list. We're about 50% full right now. Building the research around it and building this space that's going to be useful for people and is not about me, but for the first time is a business where I am the target audience. Mm-hmm. My other two businesses, I wasn't sharing the problems that my target audience had. Here, I've lived and breathed those problems. I know exactly what those problems are. And I also know how to solve many of them, not all of them. This is not about me having the answers. It's about connecting people, giving them the knowledge so that they can find those answers from the course between themselves, but equally from the network that I bring in. And that, is what the Founder Sanctuary is there for. And as far as I know, there isn't another online space like that.
No, I haven't seen one. And I have no doubt that you'll smash it like you have done everything else. Helen. Anyway, thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you.
It's been very nice having my wife here. Not too weird, right?
No, I mean, it feels just like a sort of condensed it feels like all the conversations we've had over 10 years condensed into like 40 minutes, maybe?
Yeah.
Something like that.
Except not on the sofa with Netflix on, I guess.
Yeah, or with like the kids running in and out. And this is why it's taken so long, because of the flipping kids. So I just don't leave you alone. I could have got there a lot quicker without them.
Well, thanks very much. Guys, I hope you really enjoyed this episode. Please do hit the subscribe button and catch you on the next time. Thank you.